The sun rose slowly over the golden plains of Mozambo National Park, casting long shadows and bathing the sky in fiery hues of orange and gold. Dew clung to the tall grass, glittering like tiny jewels in the morning light. Jabari Okafor, chief, ranger, and veteran of 3 decades, stood on the porch of his modest home, quietly taking in the scene. A mug of strong black tea warmed his weathered hands. At 62, Jabari was still in uniform, though only a few months remained before his retirement. His deep-set eyes, framed by lines etched by time and experience, had witnessed the wonders and horrors of the wilderness, as well as the best and worst of humanity. A long scar slicing through his left eyebrow, left by a violent encounter with poachers 15 years ago, stood out when he frowned, lost in memory. He thought of the grim days when poachers nearly wiped out the park's lion population in the 1990s. How he and his team combed the land day and night, placed camera traps, tracked paw prints. How every lion cub born felt like a small miracle. How every death left a wound. Things had improved since then, but the threat had never truly disappeared. Jabari drained his tea, grabbed the backpack he had readied the night before, and headed toward his faithful old Jeep, which had carried him across countless patrols. Today's mission was serious. Scouts had reported an armed group slipping into the park under the cover of night. A local informant claimed they were after rhinos, whose horns were more valuable than gold on the black market. "Be careful," said his wife Amara, stepping out to see him off. Her hair, once coal black, was now laced with silver, her hands marked with age. But her gaze was just as sharp, just as full of love, as the day he married her 35 years ago. She had lived, with the risks of his calling for decades, yet each departure brought the same knot of worry. "Always," Jabari said with a quiet smile, adjusting the sun-bleached hat his father had given him when he first joined the Ranger Corps. It had become a charm, never left behind. Amara reached out and fixed the collar of his worn khaki shirt. "Nuka said they're well armed and know the area," she added, naming the village contact. "We'll be cautious," he replied, kissing her forehead. "I'll be back before sunset." At the park's operations center, housed in an old stone structure, from colonial days, 6 rangers were already assembled. Young Kobe, the newest member with only 3 months under his belt, nervously twisted his cap. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead, betraying his nerves. Beside him stood Tambo, the seasoned tracker with ceremonial scars on his cheeks. Tambo could read a broken twig like a book, his quiet presence as reliable as the sunrise. Makena, the sharpshooter, checked her rifle with swift, practiced fingers. A former soldier, she had earned the trust of even the most traditional rangers through sheer skill and calm under fire. Zola, bald and solid as a boulder, and Demba, broad-shouldered with a gentle voice, tested the radios and GPS gear. The day's operation would be led by Adebayo, Jabari's deputy, a tall, athletic man of 40, marked by a dark scar on his neck from the fire that almost took his life, but didn't stop him from rescuing 3 injured animals. He stood over a worn wooden table pointing at a large map. "The poachers were last seen moving into the northeast," he said. His finger hovered over the zone where 3 lion prides overlapped. 5 men, heavily armed, likely after rhinos, possibly lions too. He looked around. "We split into 3 teams. Jabari and Kobe take the central route. Tambo and I go northwest. Makena, Zola, and Demba flank east. Keep communication open. If you find them, don't be heroes. Wait for support." A strange unease crept into Jabari's chest. He had led countless missions, but this one felt different. Maybe it was the talk with Amara or the nearing of retirement, or maybe it was the unsettling dream he'd had, lions circling him under a moonlit sky. "Remember," he told the team as he always did, "we capture, not kill. These men must face justice and stay sharp. They know we're coming." 3 jeeps roared to life, kicking up rust-colored dust. The sun was already blazing overhead. Acacia. Thickets gave way to open savanna, where umbrella-shaped trees stood like sentinels. After an hour's drive, Tambo, leading the convoy, signal to stop. He had spotted signs, snapped branches, boot prints, and cigarette butts. The rangers abandoned the vehicles, slipping quietly into the tall grass, weapons ready. Jabari led, the way with Kobe just behind, following a trail carved by wildlife. The young ranger's eyes darted about, hand hovering near his holster. Jabari gestured calmly, reminding him to stay focused. In the stillness, every sound was amplified. The rustle of grass, the hum of insects, the distant caw of a hornbill. As they approached a grove of acacia trees, Jabari noticed something. Silence. The birds had stopped singing. That was never good. Then, a glint, sunlight bouncing off metal. He froze, raised his hand to halt. A gunshot cracked the air. Kobe screamed and dropped, blood spurting from his shoulder. Jabari dove behind a tree, firing back instinctively. Adrenaline surged. Through the haze, he saw two figures retreating, one in camo with an AK, another heavier, aiming a scoped rifle. "Adebayo, contact, 2 heading west. Kobe's down," he shouted into his radio. "Hold tight. We're moving in," came the reply, barely audible over static. The firefight was brutal and short. Adebayo's group flanked swiftly. McKenna's shot took out the stocky poacher, hitting his leg. The man screamed, dropping his weapon. The other surrendered, hands raised, but 3 were still at large. Jabari patched Kobe's wound with a tourniquet of torn fabric, then pressed on. The heat was stifling, sweat blurring his vision. As he crept through the trees, he caught a flicker of movement, a shadow. He pivoted, weapon up, but he was too late. The shot slammed into his chest like a hammer blow. Pain flooded him, searing and sudden. He dropped to his knees, vision darkening. With a final burst of strength, he fired. His bullet struck the gunman, who fell back with a cry. Pain surged again, deeper this time. Jabari collapsed onto his back. The sky above too vast, too blue. Voices called his name, footsteps pounded, gunfire echoed. But it all felt far away, muffled by the growing silence, as if he were sinking below the surface of the world. "Jabari, stay with me," Adebayo's voice cut through the ringing in his ears, distorted and frantic as he leaned over him. Jabari's vision blurred, his friend's face reduced to shifting shadows. "The chopper's on its way." Jabari tried to speak, but only a faint rasp escaped his throat. The coppery taste of blood filled his mouth. Above him, the sky was a perfect, endless blue. An eagle soared silently overhead, and a strange, calming stillness spread through his body as everything began to fade. Word of the chief ranger's grave injury raced across Mourning National Park. The mission was a success. All 5 poachers were captured, but the price was devastating. The helicopter arrived 40 minutes later, during which Adebayo and McKenna battled to keep him alive. The medical team worked in the clearing, trying to restart Jabari's failing heart. His body jolted with each shock from the defibrillator, but the heart monitor remained silent. After nearly 20 agonizing minutes, the lead doctor stepped back, his face heavy. 2 bullets had torn into Jabari's chest, severing key arteries. The bleeding had been unstoppable. Adebayo, soaked in his mentor's blood, watched in stunned silence as Jabari's body was carefully lifted into the helicopter. Tears slid down his cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. The weight of loss was too immense. That evening, as the sun turned the sky crimson, Adebayo stood on Amara's porch. She was already waiting, as if some instinct had told her. One look at his face and she knew. "Where is he?" she asked softly. "At the hospital," Adebayo replied. "They'll bring him home tomorrow." She didn't break, but her eyes spoke of a grief deeper than words. "He died doing what he loved," she whispered, watching the last light vanish behind the hills. "That's how he always said he wanted to go." The next day, their children arrived. Bakari, now a doctor in the capital, was the first to reach home. He had his father's quiet intensity, and disbelief hung over him like a storm cloud. "I need to see him," he said as soon as he entered. That evening, Jabari's body returned, placed in a cool coffin. Bakari stood by it for hours, silently searching for a flicker of life. Nyla, a teacher from a far-off village, arrived late into the night. She looked more like her mother, but her spirit was her father's. She didn't cry, just gripped Amara's hand tightly, anchoring them both in the moment. "He just looks like he's resting," she murmured, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. The funeral was held on the third day. Rangers, park staff, village elders, and even officials from nearby reserves gathered to honor the fallen guardian of the wild. In local tradition, funerals were both mourning and celebration. People brought flowers and sprigs of acacia, Jabari's favorite tree, to lay beside the casket. The coffin rested on a platform beneath a towering baobab, the very tree under which Jabari often greeted the dawn, the same place where he once said the world felt most alive. A priest draped in traditional robes spoke of bravery and duty, of Jabari's fierce love for the land and its people. Amara sat with their children in the front row, her black veil hiding her expression, but her grip on their hands was firm, unyielding. Then Adebayo stepped up, and in a trembling voice shared stories of their years together. The early days, the dangerous missions, the buffalo that nearly ended his life, and how Jabari had saved him. That's when the sound came. Deep and strange, a low growl rolling across the grasslands. The mourners turned, stunned. Emerging from the savannah was a lion, massive, regal, with a thick, nearly black mane. The setting sun shimmered against his golden fur as he moved with measured grace. Panic spread. People rushed to cars, some shouting, others frozen in place. But the rangers held firm. Tambo raised his rifle, but Adebayo lifted a hand. "Wait," he said, eyes locked on the lion. The beast showed no signs of aggression. He didn't crouch or bare his teeth. He simply walked forward, as if he belonged there. The lion stopped beside the coffin, gave a low growl, and took a final step. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but instead of attacking, he looked down at the coffin, at Jabari. "Don't shoot," Adebayo said quietly. No one moved. No one dared to break the silence. The lion lay down next to the coffin, resting his head on his paws, amber eyes fixed on the wood as though he understood what it held. "What's happening?" someone whispered. But no one had an answer. The priest, shaken but resolute, resumed the ceremony, his voice quieter now, respectful of the lion's presence. Murmurs of old beliefs rose among the elders, that a lion could carry a spirit, or that nature itself came to honor a warrior. As the time came to lower the coffin, 4 rangers stepped forward. But as they lifted it, the lion suddenly stood and released a deafening roar. The sound was primal and thunderous, shaking the ground. Startled, the rangers dropped the coffin. It landed with a dull thud, untouched. The lion stood between them and the grave, baring his teeth. Every time someone approached, he growled, not violently, but with firm warning. "Why won't he let them bury him?" Amara asked, her voice barely audible beneath the veil. Adebayo had no answer. None of them did. No one could bring themselves to harm the lion, not just because it was illegal, this was a protected park, but because something about this moment felt sacred. Time stretched on. The sun fell toward the horizon, painting the land in blood-red light. Still, the lion stood guard, unmoving. Whatever this was, chance, spirit, or some unfathomable bond, he wasn't ready to let Jabari go. "Maybe he senses something," Bakari murmured, his gaze fixed on the lion's unwavering presence. "I've read that some animals perceive things beyond our understanding." Nyla, standing beside her brother, observed the lion intently. "Look at his right paw," she pointed out. "There's a scar, old, but still visible. Indeed, a long-healed scar marked the lion's front right paw, a silent testament to a past injury. After hours of unsuccessful attempts to coax the lion away without harm, Bakari made an unexpected proposal. "I need to examine my father's body. Now." Though some questioned the idea, Bakari's resolute tone left no room for debate. Adebayo nodded. "We'll clear a safe path," he instructed the rangers. 4 rangers with tranquilizer rifles formed a protective circle as the coffin was carefully lifted and moved to a nearby jeep. To everyone's astonishment, the lion did not interfere. He followed closely, his eyes never leaving the coffin. At the park's modest medical center, the lion lay near the entrance, a silent sentinel. Inside, Bakari and the seasoned Dr. Mumba opened the coffin. Under the stark medical lights, Jabari's body appeared lifeless, his skin pallid, his lips tinged blue. Dr. Mumba conducted a thorough examination at Bakari's insistence, checking pupils, listening for a heartbeat, and feeling for a pulse at various points. Suddenly, Dr. Mumba froze, his hand trembling. "Impossible," he whispered, then urgently called for resuscitation equipment. Moments later, nurses arrived with the necessary tools. "He has a pulse," Dr. Mumba announced. "Faint, but it's there." Jabari was in a rare state of suspended animation, where vital signs are nearly undetectable. Only Dr. Mumba's expertise and specialized equipment had revealed the subtle signs of life. "We must transfer him to the city hospital immediately," Bakari ordered, already preparing an IV to restore blood volume. News of the miraculous discovery spread quickly. Amara, upon hearing, fell to her knees, offering prayers of gratitude. Jabari was airlifted to the capital's hospital, where he underwent surgery to remove the bullets and repair damaged tissues. His condition remained critical for days, with doctors warning of potential brain damage due to prolonged oxygen deprivation. But a week later, Jabari opened his eyes. Initially unable to speak or move, he gradually regained strength. Within 2 weeks, he could utter single words. A week after that, he formed short phrases. Bakari leveraged his medical connections to ensure his father received the best care and rehabilitation. Once Jabari could converse, Amara recounted the extraordinary events at his funeral. "A lion?" he asked, astonished. "At my funeral? If not, for him, you wouldn't be here," she replied, holding his hand gently. "He prevented us from burying you, as if he knew you were still alive." Adebayo, a daily visitor, added, "He lay beside your coffin, growling at anyone who approached. Then he followed us to the hospital." "What happened to him afterward?" Jabari inquired. "He stayed until you were airlifted, then vanished as suddenly as he appeared." Initially skeptical, Jabari was shown photos and videos from the funeral, confirming the lion's presence. His recovery continued steadily, and a month later he returned home, celebrated as a hero, not only for his service but for his remarkable survival. The story of the lion's role in his rescue captivated the nation and garnered international attention. Reporters flocked to the Okafor residence, but Adebayo and the ranger team ensured Jabari's peace. In the evenings, Jabari sat on his porch watching the sunset, feeling a nagging sense of something forgotten. One morning, as he sipped his tea, he saw the lion standing at the edge of the savannah, its dark mane flowing in the breeze, amber eyes locked onto his. Jabari stood, leaning on his cane, and in that moment a long-buried memory resurfaced. 8 years prior, he had discovered a dead lioness killed by poachers, her cub wounded beside her. With no working radio and unwilling to leave the cub to certain death, Jabari had taken him in, secretly nursing him back to health in an abandoned ranger hut. Once the cub was strong enough, he released him back into the wild. Now, recognizing the scar on the lion's paw, Jabari realized this was the same cub he had saved. "I guess we're even now, my friend," he whispered. The lion seemed to nod before turning and disappearing into the tall grass. That evening, Jabari shared the story with Amara, who listened intently. "So now you're even," she said. "You saved his life, and he saved yours." Nature is amazing, Jabari reflected. We often underestimate animals, thinking they're driven solely by instinct. But sometimes they show memory, perhaps even gratitude. 2 months later, Jabari retired, honored at a ceremony attended by the Minister of Ecology. He received the nation's highest award for his dedication to wildlife conservation. Adebayo succeeded him as Chief Ranger, continuing his mentor's legacy. Jabari chose to remain near the park, mentoring young rangers. On quiet nights when the moon bathed the savannah in silver light, a distant lion's roar echoed near his home, bringing a smile to the old ranger's face, knowing his savior was still watching over him.